Hey everyone, this is CJ from Heavyocity, and welcome to The Brief. The Brief is a video series about storytelling through cinematic music, where we task two composers with scoring the same short piece of footage. All right, let's get right into it. I'm here with two incredibly talented composers. We'll start with one of our own. He's our creative director here at Heavyocity. He's also a composer, a sound designer. He's also our resident Skynet representative, Ari Winters. Ari, welcome back to The Brief.
Hey CJ, how's it going, man?
It's so good to have you back again. So I just wanted to double check with you. Our footage today is a little on the dark side. We're kind of diving into the thriller genre here a little bit. Are you up for going a little dark with things today?
The dark. I was born in it. Sorry. Yes, I'm looking forward to it.
Anytime we can work the Bane voice in, I feel like that's a win. So we'll take it. And then we also want to welcome in our guest composer for this episode. He's a composer for film, television, games. Recently composed the Warner Brothers DC piece, Justice Society World War II. Kevin Riepl. Kevin, welcome to The Brief.
Hey, thanks for having me. It's great
Awesome.
to be here.
It's great to have you here. We're so excited that you're here. I wanted to ask you now that we have you, you've had this really interesting experience in showcasing a ton of range in the types of projects you've scored, from TV to features to documentaries, animation, games. Can you talk to us a little bit about what that's been like to work on so many different types of projects?
I think it keeps everything fresh. First of all, training yourself and learning how to be able to write in a variety of styles makes yourself more valuable. For me, anything comes at me, after so many years of doing it, I feel confident that no matter the style or genre, I can tackle it with ease.
Awesome. Well, we've definitely seen that in your work. And then this show we also want to use as a way to showcase what's going on with composers that we really admire, like yourself. We'd love to hear a little bit about some of the projects you're working on right now.
Well, the one recently released was the Justice Society World War II, like you mentioned. I'm working on another Warner Brothers DC animated feature.
Awesome.
And soon to be released, I did a documentary on Olympic gold medalist wrestler Kurt Angle, which should be releasing soon.
Awesome. That sounds super exciting. We're very excited to check that out. Y'all can stay up on all that Kevin is working on via his website, kevinriepl.com, or on his social media accounts, and we'll have links in the description for all of those. All right, let's get right into the brief. The first element of our brief here is for story, and for that we have two men burning and burying their recent past. I mean, it started off as just a joke when hours earlier they veered into the other lane, approaching the other car head on. They're just trying to scare the other driver, but the other driver's panic became their panic as they crept towards the disabled vehicle, knowing the worst before they ever had to see it, knowing that everything in their lives would change, that there'd be no turning back from this moment. The second element of our brief here is for tone. For that, we have a modern psychological thriller that's really an homage to the long history of the genre, from films like Rear Window to Vertigo to Jacob's Ladder. And then the final element of our brief here is our director's request, which is really our wild card. And for that, the director really wants to score to be reminiscent of the style and sound of these classic psychological thrillers. So his main request is that your piece to have at least one central motif, but he also wants you to capture this classic sound and to only have your cue consist of organic elements. Okay, so we'll start with you, Kevin. Now that you've seen the footage and heard the brief, what are your first impressions here?
It's dark. It's stuff I like to work on.
Nice.
But I'll have to say that when watching it, my initial approach was not to go 100% organic. I definitely had a more musical / sound design approach to it. I mean, I was hearing sounds already in my head that I wanted to create or find. But now with the director's request, I'm sort of now have to backtrack a little bit and change my approach to it, which isn't too different. I mean, it won't change my approach to scoring the scene itself, but it's going to change how I was going to support it musically.
So when you're typically going into a scene or project for the first time, are you thinking mostly organic, or do you lean more towards something that might be a little more hybrid?
It all depends on how what the character is going through at that moment. Because essentially you don't want to score the scene. You want to score the emotions of the characters. It could be anything that comes to mind. I mean, it's usually how I want or how I'm feeling the emotions should feel, whether it be a synthetic element, sound design element, or organic musical element. It really just depends on how I want to convey that at the time. Also, a point that sometimes when directors ask for things, if they're musically or not musically inclined, sometimes they're not sure what they're asking or how they're asking it. They might hear something, say, I want that. And you might be able to deliver the same feeling with other elements other than organic. Like you can throw something in there and it still might convey what they're thinking they hear. So, I mean, as a composer, I think it's your creative input in that aspect to possibly introduce that into the score, and maybe, the director will be like, oh, that sounds awesome. And you're like, oh, that wasn't organic, whatever. So it's just like, I'm not saying I'm going to do that for this because director seems pretty strict. But that does happen often. They hear a key word from somebody else talking about music and then they use that. So it doesn't always mean exactly what the director is looking for.
Awesome. Well, we're super excited to hear what you come up with. Let's go to you, Ari. What are your thoughts and your first impressions of the scene into the brief now that you've seen it?
That's dark. That is dark.
Going dark here.
That's, I love that genre of films, like films like Prisoners, Gone Girl. I wish it didn't have to go to a throwback style across those kind of decades of that genre, but I also love it. So that's a tough ask. Also, coming up with a motif in the short period of clip that we have, that's a big ask to try and figure out a good melody that really nails the emotional aspect of it, like Kevin was talking about, in just 30 seconds. That's a boy.
It's a lot.
I'm excited though. I think this is going to be really cool.
Yeah, I think so too. And then as a composer and as a developer here at Heavyocity, I feel like you're often thinking about the future of scoring. So what are your thoughts on writing something that's maybe a little bit more backwards looking than forwards looking?
It's a really good point to bring up, right? There's one of like the big criticisms of film music today is that they might be missing that singular motif that's hummable at the end of the film. Take it or leave it. But it'll be fun to try and weave that in. And then, I love doing synth stuff. I love doing hybrid stuff. And as a developer, trying to come up with brand new sounds that composers can use and then being limited to not be able to use that, I'll have to try and find ways to kind of sneak that in. Maybe instead of a synth dive or an affected instrument dive in there, maybe it's just playing a note on a cello and then using the tuning peg and dropping the tuning as a dive.
Ooh, very cool. Well, that sounds amazing. Awesome, guys. We are super excited to hear what you come up with. To recap our brief for story, we have two characters trying to cover up a grave mistake. For tone, we have a psychological thriller. And for our director's request, it's to compose in this classic thriller style with at least one main theme or motif and only organic elements. All right, Kevin, Ari, you've seen the scene. You've got the brief. The next time we see you guys, you'll be telling us about your cues. Let's get right to the work.
Awesome.
All right.
Hey everyone, Kevin Riepl here. I wanted to take you through what I came up with. All right, so this one was tough. Now, when I first set out and doing it, I approached it regardless of style or request from the director. I caught myself approaching this 30-second clip. It brought me back to when I was doing additional music for some other composers where you're giving a small scene or a small section of music, and you immediately think, oh, I need to impress this composer I'm working for, or anybody on the project. You got to cram everything that you can possibly do to make it cool in 30 seconds. That's how I initially approached it, because I wanted to make this 30 seconds sound awesome. But then, through years of experience, you just have to take a step back. And now this 30 seconds is part of probably a 90-minute feature or a 20-minute short film. This short, specifically this one, because there's no action at all. There's really nothing to score other than the mood and maybe the emotional state of the two guys that are in the clip. So anyway, I had to back off and remember that there was a considerable amount of material before the scene and a considerable amount of material after the scene, and scored it as if it's a scene in a film that I had scored already previous to this scene. So that being said, it's one of those less is more type of things with this 30 seconds. I mean, you want to make it cool and sound great, but you don't try to in my opinion, don't try to reinvent the wheel with this 30-second clip. You sort of have to approach it for the story and what was given to us leading up to it. All right, so let's take a look at it, and afterwards I'll explain why I did certain things. All right. Okay, guys, that was the clip. Hope you liked. But anyway, okay, so let's talk about why I did what I did. Like I mentioned previously, this is a 30-second scene leading into something else, coming from something else. There's a whole lot of content that this 30 seconds is crammed between. So I approached it in that aspect, and it was difficult because, like I mentioned, I wanted to add more than I should have, and I kept on taking away stuff eventually. So as you heard in the beginning, you hear the high harmonic strings, and I wanted to use that to convey, these two guys there was a traumatic incident that didn't mean to happen, and you sort of want to convey their, life-changing moment. And I wanted to, that whole exterior sound disappears and you're left with the ringing in your ears type of thing. And sound design could definitely do that, but we were tasked to write a cue, so I emulated that in the cue. And it's still musical, so that lasts throughout the entire 30 seconds. And then as it progresses, you hear the low cellos come in. I recorded a few cello parts. The first cello part, which is what I started with, is right here. Let me see if I could just solo this whole live section. It comes in, but to help, there's the Colegno. All right, let's just solo this guy right here. That's harmonics on the live cello, and I have it going through effects to sort of weave left to right to help with the disorienting effect, to put the viewer almost in the head of these guys, because they're coming to terms with the fact that they've done something stupid, bad, and their life is now going to be completely different than before the accident. So that harmonic cello is help conveying that. And then the guttural cello here, also heavily affected. Actually, that's just the Colegno. I'm talking about this one right here, the little grunts. Let's see if we can hear. Again, heavily affected. Now, when I laid these three parts down, I had them so affected that they started to lean more towards the sound design thing. So I obviously backed off some of the reverb, backed off some of the effects, but then I started adding some synth elements to help, honestly enough, to help with the organic sound. I added, to keep it in the vein of, the Herman-esque sort of Hitchcockian sound, I added, obviously, the piano there, then the harp and vibraphone. Definitely a Herman type of thing, and that's comes back in at the end. But there was really nothing in the scene where I feel like this needs to be hit, that needs to be accentuated. It was basically an overall feeling type of thing. And the sort of the motif that was requested by the director is the piano right here. That's it, and that lingers in the distance. And then I had a solo violin mimicking that, but again, it ended up being too much. It's like forcing the emotion on the viewer, and you don't want to do that, because as soon as that starts happening, then the viewer is taken out of the film, and music loses its entire purpose, and its job is ruined. So then at the end here, where he sits or he leans, and he sort of does a little bit of introspecting on what happened. I go silent. Then the crescendo there at the end with the dissonant, tritone chord is there to help accentuate his realization that, oh shit, this is bad. He realizes what they had done, and he sort of comes, I wouldn't say comes to terms with it, but it's a realization that shit, we can't get out of that. He might be looking at his buddy right there saying, well, I can get out of this. You're the one who was driving. So he's thinking, well, now I got to kill you. That's morbid. But who knows? So it's basically, I wanted to accentuate that part because the camera's on him. He's thinking something. And I think it's supporting the realization of the situation that they just went through. So that's basically it. No special technique, no special sounds. I just wanted to convey the emotion of the scene, and keep in mind that there's previous content and content after it. So that's how I approached the scene. I didn't want to take this 30 seconds and say, "All right, I'm going to make this killer," because it's not a competition. But it is a head-to-head type of thing. And I was thinking, I got to beat Ari. I got to make I got to make it, because I know Ari has some crazy-ass ideas. And so I sort of, that's how I was originally approaching it. And, you had to back off. As a composer who comes in to help support a story, it's not your job to show your tricks, as this is my opinion. I mean, every composer has a different opinion. I mean, your job is to come in and support the narrative. So, and that's how I approach the scene.
Oh man, this was a tough one. Coming up with a main theme in such a short clip that can be used kind of as the main titles motif. Sticking strictly to organic, which is not my wheelhouse at all. I had to go back to college days for this one. And then having it feel similar to the more vintage Bernard Herrmann, Franz Waxman scores from psycho thrillers. So feeling old, but still contemporary at the same time. Whew, that was not an easy ask. So let's dive right in, and then we'll pick it apart. Here we go. Where to even begin on this? The main theme. That's where I started. I knew I needed to come up with that to let everything else kind of fall into place. So I began by just starting to play. Actually, on this piece, I wrote the whole thing as a piano reduction and then orchestrated it from there. But I wanted to start with the emotion. Like Kevin said, on this one, I think it was important to score the emotion and not the clip. It felt like it needed to have that overarching thematic idea behind the whole thing, as this is going to be, at the end of the day, it'll be part of a film, not just this one clip. And essentially what we were doing is trying to come up with the main theme for it. So I just started playing around and playing around and playing around and playing around. I came up with, I don't know, I think it was like 10 different versions before I actually found one that I liked. And I landed with this cool kind of rising theme. You know, actually, I started it in the key of C minor, which felt really, really dark. And this is something I think that kind of goes unsaid a lot of times, is the choosing the right key for the piece of music. I think it makes a huge difference. And I landed on D minor. It felt brighter. It felt more playful. It had just the right amount of lightness to it, but it also still had plenty of weight in the minor, especially with the major 7 on top. And it has this really cool, uneasy feel. I took the melody and I actually shifted it to the upbeats, and it lined up coincidentally. This was completely on purpose. Accident. It was completely on accident. That it lined up with the movement of the shovel and the digging and the tossing of the dirt, which was super cool. So you watch here. Right, kick, shovel, throw, which was really neat. But I digress. Back to the melody. The melody is kind of moving up and then descending. But the arpeggio on the bottom is actually ascending. It's rising. The second half, the whole thing is descending. But it's descending with a whole note difference from the right hand to the left hand, which is building a lot of tension as it comes down. And I thought that really represented what was going on here. You know, you had this coming together of these guys who experienced this tragedy and then maybe made the not right decision to hide it. So once I got that down, I started splitting it out and making my way from instrument to instrument and got to the big reveal. And right there at that spot, it's the first time that you see that they're actually doing something maybe wrong here. They're not just digging. And kind of like those, you know, classic films, I'll probably get some fire for this comment, but it almost felt like a lot of times those scenes and those sequences they're like overscored. Not necessarily in a bad way, but there's this big epic hit, this big orchestral stab when, you know, maybe it's just a guy on screen, or there doesn't seem to be this huge amount of action on screen and there's a lot going on in the music. So I tried to hit it with that same kind of feel. And, you know, I landed with the brass. I landed with doing just a big stab of that D minor major 7 chord, which gave it a really, really weighty impact of, uh-oh, something happened here. And I actually used stopped horns. You know, something about stopped horns just screams those classic films. I love that sound for it, and it just felt like it fit. I did, on this one, I went way back and actually recorded some violin parts on this to add a little more realism into it. And again, I am by no means a practicing professional, but it was good enough to work. Just added that airy texture to add a little bit of realism. Once I got the piano part down, I knew that as the piece was moving along, I wanted to kind of split that into crotales, tubes, and some harps. I actually doubled up the harp using a harp from Aeon and panned one left and one right to add a little more stereo spread. I balanced them a little differently, close mic versus room mic. And then underneath that, I added tubular bells, some vibes, and crotales, and got this. And there's a little hint there with the crotales of the melody coming back in at the end. And to round out everything, I used some really cool Vento woodwind effects to kind of bridge the gap across the digging sequence. And then some rips here and there as we go into the reveal of the hand. Just a really cool deep dive. And then bring it all together at the end for that big rise, and then kind of tail out with the motif at the end. At the end there, the piano kind of comes back in with that little... which kind of feels like it could resolve right back into the melody. So it's almost like we're getting a little bit of the taste of what this main theme is at the start. It sneaks its way back in at the end, and then it just feels like it resolves everything back together, bringing you right back into their mindset of, uh-oh, we did something wrong. So that was my take. I tried to nail all three asks, the vintage vibe, the strictly organic, and the main theme. Hopefully I kind of achieved all of it. Hope you enjoyed. Thanks for watching.
All right, everyone, we're back here with Kevin and Ari, and we'll get right into showing you guys each other's scenes, because though we've seen the work you guys have done, you haven't seen each other's scenes yet. So let's get right into it. We're going to start with you, Ari. Are you ready to take a peek at Kevin's cue?
Can't wait.
All right, let's roll right into it.
Neat little string thing at the start. That piano thing's cool. That is evil. Oh, man. This is very unsettling. Oh. Old school chord at the end. That was super cool. Awesome.
Okay, so Ari, talk to us a little bit about your first impressions here, because from a storytelling action perspective, I think Kevin took a pretty different approach than you did. So what was it like seeing his take on the scene?
Yeah, that was super different. It was awesome. Very different. I loved the very like unsettling nature of it. It was very contemporary, but felt like it belonged in like a creepy section of the Birds.
Mm-hmm.
It had a really uneasy vibe to it, and it felt like everything settled down, and then it came back at the end again. It was really cool.
Yeah, I think the word I kept going back to was distress. It felt I was like stressed as I was listening to it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. All right, so Kevin, now it's your turn. We'll get you set up, and we'll play Ari's cue for you. Are you ready to listen to Ari's take on the scene?
Let's do this.
All right.
That chord right there. That's awesome. The string movement is good. And the settling trims. Nice. And it almost resolves peacefully.
All right, Kevin, so let's talk first impressions for you with Ari's cue. Is there anything that stood out to you now that you've heard his take on it?
The first thing that stood out to me was how drastically different we approach the cues. It's a great cue. I didn't. What I first heard was obviously the piano part, and it was almost like it conveyed a sense of like it was almost lullaby-ish, which is very I want to see counterpoint to what you're seeing on film. The vibe I got was like they're already resolved to the fact that they've got to, cover this up, and then you see the shot of the hand and then the car with that big chord. And totally jostles you, but yet you have the piano still going underneath. I thought it was awesome. Of course, at the end, it was like it's so weird looking at these because in my mind, I saw the scene a certain way, and obviously Ari saw it another way. So when I hear his ending with the piano still playing, it's like, okay, they must be content with what they just did. I mean, I don't know, because like you have the director's guidance, but then the composer just sees the scene. It amazes me how different his piece came out and how different he saw the scene from mine. I mean, none of them are wrong, and it's really awesome, really well done cue. But yeah, I mean, it was great to watch, man. Good job, R.
Yeah.
Thanks.
So, Ari, can you talk a little bit about that storytelling choice? Because I think Kevin chose to resolve in a very different way, which I want to ask him about as well. But how did you end up making that choice to resolve it in a way that felt kind of peaceful?
Kevin, I think, hit on what I was trying to go after, and I had mentioned this in my walkthrough, where in coming up with the motif and the main theme, I wanted it to be playful. Like, these are two guys that didn't mean to really do something, and it just happened. So, getting in my head at the start, going through that motif and coming up with the right theme that felt lighthearted enough, but dark enough. Almost like it could be like the opening main titles, like a shot with a camera flying overhead of a small town kind of thing. And carrying that through to get to the end where they basically have resigned themselves to, this happened, and this is where we found ourselves, and well, let's keep moving forward and pretend like everything's still okay.
And Kevin, you chose to resolve it in this really ominous way, the way that you kind of really hit that crescendo with that final sequence with the close up, the real close up shot of that guy. So can you talk a little bit about that storytelling choice?
Well, when I got to that section, I knew that I had to hit it in a way, because to look on his face, to me, he's internally realizing something. There's something he's looking at, whether it be the car wreck or his buddy, and he's processing something. We as a viewer don't know what he's processing, but after what just happened, you gotta think that he's thinking something that's either bothering him or something. He's got to come to a resolution of what he has to do next to make this go away. So I think that my dissonant chord is basically trying to convey that he's at a point now where, oh shit, I gotta do something else. Like, we just had this massive accident, and our lives are changing, and I need to do something. After we bury this or get rid of this moment, there's something else that you have to tackle. So I was sort of like leading into, something else.
That's such a great point to bring up, right? On camera, on screen, we're seeing this guy's emotional reactions to whatever's occurring, but we don't know his internal monologue. And
Right, exactly.
A lot of times it falls on the composer to translate that, film style, film
Right.
coloring will make a difference, but the music is really what can kind of portray what's going on.
For sure. Yeah. So that's why my approach and your approach, we had the guy thinking two different things, but watching it static without music, it's like, or if not us, but somebody, they might be lost in the story because there's nothing there to sort of point the emotion in the direction the story needs it to go. So yeah, you're absolutely right. The music definitely is essential in that type of scene.
Do you notice that a lot as a composer, that your kind of pushing along the emotional anchors and like that the kind of emotional train of the scene as it's going, that you have to kind of fill that in?
As a working composer working on stuff, yes. But as a viewer, a composer watching stuff, if I notice it, then it's doing it too much.
Okay.
Usually if the scene and I don't notice the music and the scene has really got me, then the music did its job. But if I start if I'm watching a scene, an emotional scene or any kind of scene, and the music is almost forcing me in a direction, you know that, and this is no fault of the composer, this is just, how some projects come together, is that I think the music is overstating what it needs to state, and it sort of takes me out of the moment a little bit. So, but it's always a conscious thing.
Very cool. Well, thanks, guys. I mean, these cues came out amazing. Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts about this. I think this is really, really helpful. Just want to thank you, Kevin, for coming on as our guest composer for this episode.
Course,
we really
man.
appreciated having you. And
Thanks for
thank
having
you
me.
to all you out there for checking out this episode of The Brief. As always, please like, please subscribe, please comment below. We love the growing community surrounding the show, and we'd love to hear your thoughts on Ari and Kevin's different takes on the scene. There are also links to both Ari and Kevin's scored scenes in the description below, so be sure to check those out. And then we also have another incredible guest composer lined up for episode 4, so make sure you keep an eye out for that. Awesome. Thanks again, everyone, and we will catch you all next time on The Brief.
See you later, guys.
Bye.